last week, as we're recording this, the first episode of the new season of Dark Side of the Ring debuted, and it was all about one of your peers, John Tenta, better known to fans as Earthquake, and his run in wrestling and his unfortunate death at a very young age. Ted, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your experiences around John and thoughts on his work.
I didn't know John all that well, but I don't think anybody would argue that he was one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. And for a guy his size, that's a good thing. He's not somebody you would want to piss off.
No. But
he was just, a really nice guy. And for a big guy, I think, because, he wasn't in the business all that long, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And he came along pretty good, and then got into the tag team, right?
And Natural Disasters,
and it was off to the races. And they did a pretty good job. I'm not an expert on their whole body of work, but I'll put it this way. I never looked at a match they had and said, "Oh, that was shit." Those guys were always good, and they were always team players.
Man, and Jake and I just talked about John Tenta on the episode that's going to be upcoming this Tuesday of the Snake Pit, where he squashed Jake's pet snake Damien in a pretty iconic moment. But Jake was singing his praises. He said, "Man, a big guy, pretty new to the business, but God Almighty, that man could move, and it's smooth in the ring."
Yeah, I mean, and that's good. I mean, I left that out. For a guy his size, he moved really well. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, he's a big guy. I mean, he could have passed for a sumo wrestler, but I've never known one sumo wrestler that could move like he did.
And he actually was a sumo wrestler before he got into
yes, exactly.
Wrestling. Yeah,
and that's the sumo stuff. If you know anything about it, I've watched it, and you have to understand it to appreciate it. But those guys, they're strong. I mean, especially leg strength. You see them do all this, but it's they gotta have the legs of a stallion to be a good sumo wrestler.
And John actually said that the toughest thing he ever did on his body was sumo. Apparently, it's very, very taxing. Last question about John, and we'll get to our main subject. Ted, being that you were in Money Inc. and you guys had a brief rivalry with the Natural Disasters, I am sure that you took that finish from John at some point where he runs and he gives you the ass splash while you're laid out in the ring. What did you think about taking that maneuver?
Hey, I never feared it because I trusted him, and that's the whole thing. The whole thing about pro wrestling is there's two guys that get in the ring, and what the audience has to understand, because there's no more wrestling is sports entertainment. It always has been sports entertainment, but my thing is always, and even though most of us even understood that after a while, it's kind of like watching a good magician. It's like, he didn't really make that, whatever it was, disappear, just poof, but you bought sleight of hand or whatever, but you're going, how did they do that? How did they make that happen? And the thing about pro wrestling, I always felt, was make the match as believable as you possibly can. And I think that's what's missing today, especially with the guys. They go in there and they do all these crazy bumps and just fly all over the ring, and they don't sell anything. And it's like, okay, big deal. So what? It's not a tumbling act. You're not out there to be a gymnast. You're out there to make people believe that you're having a real brawl with the guy across the ring. And, that's always been my forte. And John, again, I had no problem with him. I mean, there are some guys that are, and like Andre. I mean, think about Andre could have squashed anybody,
Mhm.
and I think there are a couple that he didn't like too much that he did squash. but Andre's Andre, and again, another guy who was a giant in every way imaginable, but also at his core, a very nice guy.
Man, let me say, when I was a kid, I knew that I didn't know to call it a work or anything, but I suspected that wrestling was predetermined as a kid because I'm like, well, I don't know. I've seen a couple kids on the schoolyard get punched in the face, and they normally bleed or get a black eye afterwards. However, when I would watch John Tenta drop that splash on people with his butt while you're on the ring, I would watch that and say, like, I don't know how you fake that. Like, he's got to really be killing those people. So, man, believable. But you're saying he was light as a
Yeah,
feather, huh?
yep, yep. He was good.